Hey everybody, it's Greg Rice. We're here in downtown Providence. We're with Mr. Brett V. Beaubien. Brett,
Pleasure to see you.
how you doing, brother?
Fabulous. How are you doing?
Brett is the owner, the operator, the founder of the law office of Brett V. Beaubien.
That's right.
And Brett and I connected through our good friend and your colleague, Mr. John LaRochelle.
John LaRochelle, who is in the office right next door behind the wall here.
A brief round of applause for John,
He's
a great
terrific.
guy. And Brett, we are here in the Turk's Head building. It's a very historic and important building in Providence. How does that make you feel looking out this window here? When you show up to work every day, how does that make you feel? Considering your schooling, where you came from, that this is where you are today.
Yeah, really, it's terrific. Tremendous to be here. I'm really, really fortunate to have the opportunity not only to be in this, as you mentioned, historically significant building, which is on the corner of Weybosset and Westminster in the sort of financial district, as it's called, in Providence. Been here since I officially started the practice in September 2017. Yeah, I come into work and, it's hard not to be impressed with the view of sort of the down city area and India Point Park and the bridge and the bay, Narragansett Bay. So that certainly sort of wakes you up in the morning and gets you ready for a hard day in court or at the office or whatever it might be. Truly blessed, and more than that, just fortunate and blessed to be in the specific suite I'm in with the attorneys that I work with.
Who else is in here?
Yeah, so the whole reason I'm here is because I did some work for Attorney John McDonald, who is a criminal defense attorney in the state, in the city of Providence. I was doing some remote work for him as a law student at Roger Williams University, and ultimately, by the time I finished and I graduated, we had, through a long process, we had sort of talked about what it would be like for me to open my own firm and how would I generate business and clients and whatnot. He was a super helpful mentor, took me under his wing, and not only provided me with lots of business advice and legal advice about how to be a good lawyer, but space. And so he basically offered me a cubicle in the suite, and I did that for a few years. And then right after the COVID-19 pandemic sort of eased, one of the offices inside the suite, there's 7, became available, and then I took that over. So now I have an official office as of a couple of years ago. But I was renting space from him for several years, and what I would do is I would help out with his cases. I would go to court for him and some other attorneys that are in the office. Scott Lutz is here, attorney Jason Knight. Really great guys, know what they're doing, and are so willing to share and to teach. It's really important. I try to do the same. And I was also doing some work for John Calcagni and John Grasso. They were in the Custom House building for a couple of years before they just went down the street. So I would just sort of cut my teeth going to court, 5 or 6 hearings a day, if it's an arraignment or a pretrial or whatever it might be, assisting with their clients kind of on an ad hoc basis. And along the way, I would generate my own clients and my own little caseload. And I worked right out of this office, and then sort of the training wheels came off after right before COVID, and I started just I cover every once in a while for a favor, but basically I'm up and running. Got my own place, my own practice, and it's tremendous.
Isn't it awesome though to say, I'm stumped on this one thing. I don't know. I need an opinion. Hey, John or John.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. It's huge, and I'm next door. John LaRochelle, if he comes in here, would tell you. I am in his office, a couple times a day at least. If it's not just to socialize, to pick his brain. John McDonald, Jason Knight, Scott Lutz, anyone here, we all do, right? And so it's a real good
camaraderie's tight
family environment, and I couldn't have done it without that opportunity. I had thought in the early days about, this is sort of expensive real estate down here and whatnot, and that's true, but it's worth every penny of it. It comes back to me in both business and personal benefits, and so I love it. I like you said, you can't just figure it out on your own and make mistakes. You've got to be able to ask somebody, what they think and get a second set of eyes
100%.
on some things. So that's a huge benefit. Yeah.
So what do you do for the folks at home specifically? What is your niche?
So criminal defense is the niche, and within criminal defense, you can break that down into several areas. So there's sort of like lots of different crimes out there, whether it's drugs or guns or fraud or domestic violence or assault, whatever, what have you. I cover all of criminal defense. I work in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, so even though my physical office is here in Providence, probably about half my caseload is actually in Massachusetts.
Okay.
At any given time. Obviously, that fluctuates. I like it that way. I love Massachusetts practice. So I'll be in courts in mostly in the Bristol County area, but also Worcester County, sometimes Norfolk County, Plymouth County a little bit. And then I do the rest of the work spread out in Rhode Island, mostly in Providence, but obviously some other counties sometimes as well. And within criminal law, you have sort of two tracks, if you will. You have sort of the trial court, lower court work, and then appeals court work. And so that just simply means when someone is charged with a crime and the case is new and it hasn't been resolved yet, there hasn't been a trial or a plea at this point, that'll be in the lower courts, the district courts or the superior courts. And that's where investigations are done. And like I said, either a trial or a plea agreement will be reached, or in a perfect world, from our perspective, a dismissal, if we think the case is worthy of dismissal. And then you've got the appeals court track. So if someone has lost at trial, been convicted, or there was other lower court outcomes that were not favorable, a client has a right to appeal that to a higher court, the appeals court in Massachusetts, and then ultimately the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts, or in Rhode Island, there's no mid-level appeals court. It's just the trial court to the Rhode Island Supreme Court. And that process is very different. It is what I love to do. I do a good amount of appellate work in both states, and it involves going to court a little less. So it's a lot of research and writing of legal issues and reviewing court records and transcripts from the case when it lived in the lower court.
Gotcha.
And so I enjoy that sort of like task or challenge of putting this puzzle together and figuring out what went wrong, what can I prove at the appeals court level, and it's very academic. So you're not in court every few weeks or every couple of months trying to negotiate or get a deal or right. There's no witnesses, there's no new hearing or anything like that. You're
reviewing the play in the game that already transpired.
That's right. So you're reviewing all of these records, and then you're writing usually what's called a brief, which will be a written legal argument for whatever error you're claiming and the outcome that you desire. And then in Rhode Island, it's 5 justices in the Supreme Court that will decide whether they agree with you or the state. But you'll have one day you'll have, after maybe a year and a half or so, you'll have an oral argument where for 30 minutes I get to go and argue before the Supreme Court, and that is just great stuff to me. I loved it in law school, doing the moot court thing, which is like a practice run of that sort of process, and the same thing in Massachusetts. So it's a real rewarding and challenging type of work. But you need a balance. So I do a little of that with some trial level work, because you've got to take both just to keep your skills sharp, I think, but also from a business standpoint, right? And to have some variety in my daily life. Yeah.
So appellate, let's talk that. Do you have a recent example or case that you could talk about where you were successful and how that went?
I do. Actually, at the Massachusetts Appeals Court in December 2022, so just about a year ago, I filed a brief in support of a motion to suppress, or rather the lower court's granting of a motion to suppress a firearm that was seized during an unlawful vehicle stop in Dorchester. And so what happened is at the lower court, which I was not involved in, the defendant was represented by a different lawyer. They had a suppression hearing, which is a hearing to determine whether evidence can come in to trial or not.
Okay.
And the evidence in particular was a firearm and some statements. And ultimately, the trial court concluded that the evidence should be suppressed, meaning it's kept out.
Okay.
If that happens, the Commonwealth cannot go forward with their case. They don't have any evidence to present. And so the Commonwealth appealed in that case to the Massachusetts Appeals Court.
You appealed your appeal. Or
No, they appealed the decision by the trial judge
Gotcha.
suppressing that evidence.
Gotcha,
Right?
okay.
Because they don't like it. They can't go forward on their case without being able to present this evidence. So they appealed to the so any aggrieved party, whether it's a defendant or the state, can appeal and have a higher court review a decision from a lower court. And so in that case, because the defendant had won at the lower court, the Commonwealth appealed it to the appeals court, and they said that the judge got it wrong and that the evidence should not have been suppressed. It should have come in. So there was, there were written arguments that went back and forth. 2 different briefing stages took about, I don't know, altogether almost the whole year of 2022, and then ultimately the Massachusetts Appeals Court decided the case in late December of last year in my favor, in my client's favor.
Wow.
Yep. So they agreed that the judge made the right decision and suppressed the evidence properly. And then from there, the Commonwealth was still aggrieved, so they filed what's called an application for further appellate review, meaning now they're saying that the appeals court was wrong, and that both the lower court and the appeals court was wrong, and they're going to the Supreme Judicial Court, and they wanted the Supreme Judicial Court, the SJC, it's called in Massachusetts, to say that both lower courts were wrong and that the evidence should come in. You're not automatically entitled to having the SJC review a case in those circumstances. So they have to basically say, would you please take our case and review this? And the SJC denied the review. So they, basically reaffirmed the appeals court decision. They wouldn't even hear it. And the case ended, and my client is now a free man.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was great. It was a great outcome.
And you feel purposeful, you feel prideful, you feel passionate about something.
Of course, absolutely. Part of what we do, what drives me and others that do criminal defense work, is that we hold the state to its job, which is to pursue justice in a fair manner and provides due process. Obeying the rules of our state and the laws and the Constitution. And when those rules and our constitutional rights are broken, the state shouldn't be able to get away with winning under those circumstances. And we want a fair outcome. We want the right person to be found guilty and not the wrong person. And so that's part of what we do is to make sure that justice is served. And so that's what happened in that case.
Interesting. And you mentioned the state, right? The state being the Attorney General's office?
Right. So the state is represented in criminal proceedings by the Office of the Attorney General. And in Massachusetts, it would be a county district attorney's office.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I saw recently on the news, the AG here in Rhode Island was going after a solar company. So when the AG goes after a business, how does that differ from going after somebody personally?
So I'm not sure what news story you're talking about, but generally speaking, if the AG has a criminal division and a civil division, and I'm not sure if this business was charged with a crime, or if some CEO from the business was charged with a crime, but that could have been the case. Probably more likely, though, the civil division of the AG's office was going after the company for some violation of who knows what, but basically the civil department investigates businesses or even individuals who violate civil statutes versus criminal statutes. So the difference between civil litigation and criminal litigation is that in criminal law, the penalties could include fines, but also include jail time. So when somebody commits a crime, they do something that's so wrong that we as a society have said they need to go to jail for that, right? But in civil litigation, for example, you hit somebody with a car, they sue you for personal injury, and they're suing you directly, not the state, right? But when they sue you, they're looking for what's called money damages to compensate them for their injury. If it's an invasion of privacy or whatever it might be, a contract violation, right? If a house sale goes wrong, that person's going to be sued in civil court, and they're not going to go to jail if they're found sort of quote unquote guilty. We say they're liable. They're liable for the wrong that they committed, and the punishment is not going to be jail. It's going to be money damages. Yeah, right. In most cases, criminal violations result in jail. Obviously, sometimes fines as well, but the big picture with crimes is that people go to jail.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So business, money, and then personal could be time and money,
Yeah, basically.
essentially.
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah.
Now, switching gears a little bit, I always was interested by plea bargaining.
Mhm.
So, do you have a formula in your brain, or were you taught something in school on how to determine if it makes sense to make a plea with one of your clients
Mhm.
or to move forward with a trial? What's your thought process when it comes to plea bargaining?
So obviously every case is different, every client's different, but generally what you have to do is you have to weigh the possible outcomes after a trial, which could include jail, right, with the evidence, the strengths and the weaknesses of the evidence in the case. And so, you've got to counsel somebody and say, look, here's what evidence could come into the trial. If all this evidence comes in, we think, based on our experience, that you could be guilty, right? And a judge or a jury would find you guilty. And you talk through that in great detail about how strong the evidence is, or what evidence might come in or not come in, and what the theory of defense might be, if you've got a self-defense theory, or let's say the person just didn't do it. Can we generate that? Can we prove that through witnesses and through other evidence, right? Ultimately, you have to weigh the pros and the cons and the risks of a trial and the possible outcomes. And the client has to make a personal choice based on that, sort of informed guidance about what's best for them. And there's no perfect formula. Like I said, every case is different. And so as part of the plea bargain, though, you'll be, usually the defense will be presented with an offer to resolve the case without a trial. Obviously, we like to
From the state, you're saying?
from the state, from the
Gotcha.
prosecutor or the
That's
Commonwealth.
typical, or that is?
Yeah, no,
what's
that's typical. I mean,
Gotcha.
it's pretty rare to not get any offer to resolve something. Most of the time, the state and the defendant wants to weigh their options for not having a trial.
Yeah, time
right?
and money.
Yep, time and money, and for the defendant, risk of incarceration. And so I mean, even if I had a client who says, look, no way, I didn't do this, I don't want to take any plea deal whatsoever, I think it's the best practice to obtain an offer from the state or
See
the
what it is.
Commonwealth. I present it to my client. I say, listen, you don't have to take this. This is what the offer is. I wanted you to know this. You have this option. All you have to do is tell me no, and we move forward with the trial. That's fine. But I think it's the best practice to be able to at least relay an offer.
Just see what it is.
Yep. You don't want somebody coming back later and saying, well, why'd you tell me to go to trial? You didn't even get an offer.
Gotcha.
Right? But yeah, I mean, you weigh the pros and the cons and the strength and the weaknesses of the evidence. I suppose the answer to the question is most people probably take a plea deal, so to speak. Certainly if there's no jail as part of the agreement, that's a pretty strong incentive because now there's no risk of jail unless they violate like a suspended sentence of probation. Right. But generally you'd think you're not going to do that. And if the evidence is strong, right, it usually makes sense. And that's hopefully that's the goal of plea bargaining and the pretrial process is to sort of look at both sides and show the state why this person doesn't deserve to go to jail even if they did what they're charged with doing. Sometimes during plea bargaining we get charges dismissed in exchange for a plea, so that is helpful because then those charges will come off the person's record.
Gotcha.
And maybe they were charged with 6 crimes and now they're just pleading guilty to 2, right? And then that factors into when they can have their record expunged. And so, a lot of times charges at the outset of a case don't really hold up with the evidence once we investigate and once we get the full discovery, the evidence from the state. And so it makes sense, even from the state's perspective, to say, yeah, you know what, you're right. This shouldn't have been charged, but this should have been. That's what the pretrial process is supposed to do, is to
hash it
out, get to the truth of the matter. What does justice look like in this scenario? Weighing everyone's interest, both the state, the public, and the defendant's interest. Yeah.
And I used to teach at medium security. I would teach job readiness.
Okay.
So I'd go in there, volunteer, and there'd be 20 guys, and I would teach them skills to become employable and to stay employable.
That's great.
And a lot of them in there were either held without bail or couldn't make bail. So my question when that happens is, how difficult is it for you as their counsel to obtain information, to sit down and talk and have a conversation when they're incarcerated versus when they're out on bail and they could come at your office for 3-4 hours, no problem, meet you for lunch, whatever. Does that really make a difference, or is it not so much?
Well, it does make a difference. Obviously, it reduces the amount of time that I can communicate with my client, and the method of communication. Having someone in the office is a much better environment for me and for the client. When people are incarcerated, we have to deal with their family, their point of contact.
Right.
So that eases that burden a little bit. But ultimately, we have to go down and visit. We just have to see the person in person, in the facility, and sit as long as possible and answer their questions and bring them materials to review, and make sure we do that as often as what's reasonable under the circumstances. We rely on letters and in-person visits.
Gotcha.
But it's tougher, and nobody wants to be held without bail while a case is pending anyway. So that's why it's important at the pretrial stage or the bail stage to attempt to obtain release. If it's a hold without bail, that means having a bail hearing where we can sort of challenge the need to hold the person whatsoever. And then we have the question of, even if it's not a hold without bail, what's the amount of bail that's appropriate under the circumstances?
Gotcha.
And try to convince the state and the court to set the lowest bail that's possible, that's affordable for the person. Yeah, exactly.
And how, percentage-wise, are being held without bail in your experience? Is it more rare?
It's hard to put a percentage. I mean, first of all, only capital charges, capital offenses, and drug distribution offenses are subject to holding without bail in Rhode Island. So you've got to be charged with a handful of crimes.
Gotcha.
Murder, drug distribution, really serious crimes to even be considered to be held without bail. In Massachusetts, it's slightly different. They have a process called a dangerousness hearing there, where certain crimes, there's about a little less than a dozen or so crimes that fit the definition of triggering what's called a dangerousness hearing, and that's sort of like a bail hearing where the court has to decide whether the person is too dangerous to be released, or if they are, what amount of bail is necessary to ensure that they're going to come back to court. And so, it just depends on generally if the evidence is high against the person at the outset, or if they have a long history of defaulting and not showing up to court, chances are they're going to be held without bail if they're charged with a hold without bail offense. But even sometimes, even with hold without bail offenses, if the evidence is weak at the outset, or the person has strong community ties and there's no history of criminal history or criminal defaults, we have secured release in those types of cases where the state can't prove that they should be held without bail. Yeah.
And bail is what, 10% you have to come up with?
No, not exactly. So bail is some amount that the court sets that it finds is needed to ensure that the person will sort of come back to court and not commit new crimes, right?
Gotcha.
It's part of your agreement when you go out. You are promising not to commit new offenses while your case is pending, and that you'll come back to court. And so it's sort of to minimize the risk of flight. Traditionally, that's been basically the analysis. The 10% figure you mentioned relates to what they call surety bail in Rhode Island.
Gotcha.
So there's guidelines about what amount of bail should be set in any given case. If a judge sets bail at $1,000 with surety, okay, then it's not $1,000 that they're forking over. It's 10%. Surety is 10%. So they have to pay $100
Okay.
of $1,000. That's what that means.
Gotcha. And that's not applicable in all bail. So if it says $25,000 bail, it is $25,000?
No, usually you're going to be, it's with surety.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So Brett, background.
Yes.
What is your background?
My background. Okay, so I grew up in Rhode Island. I'm a Rhode Island kid. I was born in Woonsocket.
Ooh.
Yep.
What street?
I was born on Pond Street.
Pond Street.
Pond, which is down in the downtown area. Yeah. I don't have a lot of memories of that home. We left there and quickly moved into a house on the east side of Woonsocket, and then ultimately I grew up on a street called Summit Street, which was in the Globe section. For those Rhode Islanders who probably remember a place called the Beef Barn restaurant.
Beef Barn.
Yeah, which used to be on the corner of the North Smithfield border in Woonsocket. Well, there's Coffee and Cream that burned, which was a breakfast restaurant right next door to it, sort of a sister restaurant a little bit.
Ah, okay.
But the Beef Barn was like a lunch type sort of roast beef place that was it looked like a barn. And it didn't burn. They closed. They relocated. They're in North Smithfield now, and they rebuilt the facility.
Gotcha.
I think they have a second location in Bellingham. But so I grew up in Woonsocket High School, and I won't say what high school class year, but you can probably find it. And basically went to University of Rhode Island.
Okay.
Got a business degree, and then worked. Didn't go to law school right away. I went back when I was just a little bit over 30. For most of my 20s, I ran restaurants. So yep. So with my business degree, I was already working in restaurants from the time I was a kid in high school. I was cooking and bartending and everything else, and I loved it. And I thought I did well. I made good money. I enjoyed the work, the people, made terrific memories. Thought that I wanted to open a restaurant at some point. So a business degree made sense, got out and started working for a place called Paragon. Lots of Rhode Islanders will remember that. And opened up helped open the one down in East Greenwich. Worked there for years, and then that closed, and then we a different team of people opened up what was called 1149 Restaurant.
Yes.
And I worked there for several years as well. And ultimately, though, I had this lingering interest in becoming an attorney. I also had an interest in the Navy, a great deal of interest in the Navy. At some point, I decided, I'm getting older. I'm going to be 30. Better figure this out. Do I want to go back and go to law school or not? And so I did. I applied to Roger Williams University and pursued a Navy JAG sort of path, if you will. While I was doing that, did an internship on the Navy base in Newport my first year. And then I was so lucky, so fortunate to be given my second year internship with the Navy JAG office, which is the Judge Advocate General's office. It's the Navy lawyer, military law. They placed me in Naval Air Station Sigonella, which is in Sicily, Italy. Lived there for the summer of 2015.
Wow.
Incredible experience. Just loved it. Terrific people. Terrific island. I've been back twice. Wow. And I'll keep going back.
Aren't you pursuing your dual citizenship in Italy?
Yes, I am. So I became so enamored with the lifestyle that the Italian side of me thought, hey, why not just see if I can get dual citizenship? So I've been pursuing that for a couple of years. It's a long process. COVID slowed it down. But at this point, finally, my Rhode Island documents are in order. They're with a immigration lawyer who's going to basically petition the Rome court for citizenship through my great-grandmother and great-grandfather. So hopefully next time I go, I'll have a EU passport.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But ultimately, so I did those two experiences in law school, and again, terrific experience with the Navy JAG Corps. Ultimately, though, I think because I was a little older and I had already run businesses, it didn't make sense where I was in life at the time. It didn't make sense for me to start a military career at that age. And I was very interested in learning about opening a legal practice. Like I mentioned, I basically had developed a pretty good network in law school with some local attorneys. Did some remote work as what they call a law clerk, doing research and writing with some Providence lawyers, and one in particular, John McDonald, sort of took me under his wing as a he's my mentor. Still call him my mentor to this day. He's a terrific, and he helped me not only become a good lawyer but a good business person, and sort of that's what got me started. So I did not pursue that Navy opportunity after my internship, and instead started laying the groundwork to open a business.
And here we are.
Yes.
And where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years, hopefully, for the most part, doing the same thing in the same office. I have loved being here since September 2017, surrounded by terrific people. I would like to do more appeals, more appellate work generally. And so that's the long-term arc. Gotcha. I like the appeals because you're just not on the road every day, running around. You're in the office researching and writing.
Thorough.
Yep. So, and I think as I get older, I'll probably not want to be in traffic every morning. But that type of work I really love.
Yep.
I feel most effective at that type of work. And both from a standpoint of fixing problems to sort of an academic sort of reward fulfillment. Yep. And so that's my long-term goal, is to continue to build that side of my practice until it's the bulk of my practice.
And do you want to remain as a solo practitioner?
Yeah, a lot of people ask that. I do. I mean, maybe that answer will change one day, but I haven't. I've considered an associate before. I like the freedom of working for myself, focusing on my clients directly. When you have associates, you're going to have the associate deal with clients. People hire me. They get me personally. They email me. They talk to me on the phone. I have an assistant. Obviously, we have assistants here for calendaring and whatnot. But I'm the lawyer, right? Yeah. And I like having that close-knit relationship with my clients. That's how I think I can deliver the best outcome. Sometimes when some cases come in, many lawyers will do what's called, we co-counsel together. So two lawyers are hired, and then they get two lawyers. And so, if there's ever a case that's just too big for me to handle on my own, or it makes sense for another reason for another lawyer to come in, we do that. And so that eases the burden of some of the work. But in terms of actually hiring somebody, I'm just not interested. I'm doing very well, doing fine the way it is. I like having that freedom of working for myself, but having the ability to co-counsel when necessary. And to have to have other lawyers in the office to bounce ideas off of, basically for free, right? And then if I'm in a jam and I can't make it, or I get sick and I can't go to court one day, I can think of 5 or 6 or 7 lawyers that I can call and say, hey, I just need a hand this morning. Can you help me? Somebody's going to help. I do it for other lawyers. We all work together. So I think the best business model for me is to be as you say, a solo practitioner.
Lean and mean.
Lean and mean, exactly.
With the access to a network, a syndicate,
a support network. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that too in the real estate brokerages. The big model used to be hire 100 agents and then go out and sell, and the broker will collect desk fees. But now it's reversed.
Yeah.
People like in-person, intimate service.
That is my experience as well.
On all fronts.
Yeah. And that's what I enjoy. So that works for me.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now,
another thing I always ask everybody, and AJ will laugh, but what is your biggest weakness?
So this is something I've noticed recently, which I've had to sort of rein in. I like to be involved and be very, very social. Most people that know me would say that, I think. So consequently, I do a lot of volunteering on different boards, whether it's in my community or with the law school or in the legal community, or where I live in Warren. So I end up giving away a lot of my time. And, you want to do that. It's important. But by the same token, saying yes to everything is just not good, right? You've got to learn to say no and to limit yourself so that you can get home at a reasonable time, have a life, and not just live to work, right? Outside of that, my weaknesses, I almost feel like you should ask a non-biased, objective party. Somebody else. I can say I can tell you what my weaknesses are, but I kind of feel like it'd be tainted. Emails drive me crazy these days.
Gotcha.
I think we all rely on too many emails and being CC'd on everything in the world when I don't need to be. It drives me crazy. Sometimes I just, if there's one complaint I have about my job, I love my job. I wish I spent less time dealing with
in the weeds,
dealing with emails and whatnot, and that sort of drives me nuts and gives me headaches. Maybe that's a weakness, and I should learn to accept life the way it is.
Perhaps. So how do you decompress? What are your hobbies? What do you do to relax?
So I don't like working out. Never a gym type of guy. I love to swim. I've been swimming most of my life. In the summer, I like to get into the water. I live in Warren, so I go to Warren Town Beach quite a bit to do laps. In the off season, I use the campus rec center at the law school because that's nearby. That helps me decompress. I like to do hot yoga.
Yep.
And then living in Warren, I'm really close to the bike path, so I take walks. My girlfriend and I will take walks after every meal at dinner. Walk it off and see the sights and sounds.
Beautiful.
And I like to travel as much as possible. Getting back to my my Sicilian adventures. Like I said, I've been back twice and try to travel wherever I can, whenever I can, even in the United States, just to get away, even if it's a 4-day trip. That's a really, I'm a huge fan of the 4-day weekend.
Yep, same.
A few times a year, just go away and
Thursday, Sunday.
Yep, Thursday through Sunday or Monday, Friday through Monday. Just go and decompress. It's long enough to get away, to feel like you're not working, but not so long that you get back and you're catching up in the weeds and you're out of control.
Yeah.
It's affordable. So that, I think that's probably the way I like to relax best.
Awesome. And lastly, for the folks at home, what do you want them to know about you? What do you want them to take from this interview?
Well, outside of everything we've already discussed, if you're considering hiring a defense attorney, I would just suggest that you get someone who you get along with, right? A lawyer-client relationship is just like any other relationship. You should interview different lawyers. Any agreement you get should be in writing, in my opinion, so that everybody knows what is expected of both sides and what the costs and terms are going to be. But make sure you have a good chemistry with the lawyer. You want to, you're entrusting this person with maybe your life in many cases, your freedom.
Very true.
But either way, even in a simple matter, you're entrusting them, you're paying them for something, right? So I think that you want to have a good sense of confidence on a professional and personal level, that you're working with somebody that you get along with, that you have that understands your goals. But I think that working together in a lawyer-client relationship is just don't take it lightly. I do what I do because I love working for people and helping to fix problems. And when you hire me, you're going to get a close-knit relationship. I'm going to be available to you by email, by phone, by and get back to you as soon as I possibly can. I try to get back to everybody within 24 hours and to design a custom plan of action, right? So I guess I would just want people to know that you be cautious and interview lawyers and make a decision that you feel comfortable with. There's no shortage, so you've certainly got plenty to choose from.
And how do they get in touch with you?
So you can go to my website, which I believe is going to be showcased on the video.
Boom! It's on the screen right now.
But you can call. You can call the office. You can email me. 401-427-4280 is the direct office number, and then my email is Brett, BRETT at B as in boy, V as in Victor, B as in boy, defense.com. So that's Brett at BVBdefense.com. And come up into the office, Suite 1440 in the Turk's Head building. We're here business hours, Monday through Friday. We'd love to see you.
I think your view's better than John's.
Pretty close.
John's got this way, you got this way.
He's got a great view, but I've got the only office in the suite with a window that opens.
Oh.
And so that, it makes all the difference.
So if things get tough, you can just end it all.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate it, Greg.
And if you have any questions for me, I don't know why you would, but put them in the comments field below. We'll get right back to you. Once again, Greg Rice here in downtown Providence with Brett, V as in Vincent.
Vincent is the middle name?
Vincent Beaubien.
Thank you.